Good evening, everybody. It is your girl, Marcy Thomas, here with you a little bit earlier today, but it is for a special reason because we have an extra special guest that she knows we have been trying to do this for a while, and this was the perfect time for us to come together to have a conversation. So thank you for being here as we prepare to dive into a conversation with the one and only Victoria Christopher Murray with her latest and greatest Harlem Rhapsody. So, just to give you a little background about her, Victoria Christopher Murray is a New York Times best-selling author of more than 30 novels, including The Personal Librarian, which was a Good Morning America Book Club pick, and The First Ladies, which was Target's 2023 Book of the Year, both of which she co-authored with Marie Benedict. She is also an NAACP Image Award winner for outstanding literary work for her novel, Stand Your Ground, a Library Journal Best Book of the Year. She holds an MBA from NYU Stern School of Business, and she is just the bee's knees, as they say. So I'm super excited to welcome our very special guest, Victoria Christopher Murray. So welcome, Victoria.
Oh, what an introduction. The bee's knees?
The bee's knees. Yeah, I kind of went back in time with that one.
You did. Well, we're talking historical fiction tonight, so
yes.
That was perfect.
Yes, Harlem Rhapsody. So first of all, congratulations on another great best-selling book.
Thank you.
You've been doing this for a while and have written in several different genres, but this is your first time doing historical fiction by yourself.
Yes. This was, oh my goodness, this is the book I've been waiting my whole life to write, and I didn't even realize it. But yes.
Yes. And it was such a great read, y'all. I didn't even tell y'all who I was. I'm so excited. Victoria, but most of you have been here before. So, I've been doing this. Actually, Victoria, you don't know this, but 11 days from now, BGC Book Club will be 5 years old. So you are a part of this. Yes, you're a part of this anniversary celebration. So I'm so happy to have you here. So this book, wow, I read it really quickly just to let you know that, because I kept turning the pages, because it is really not only a love letter to a very special woman that we're going to get into here in a moment, but it's a love letter to Black authors. It's a love letter to Harlem, the Harlem Renaissance, all of that. So first and foremost, what was it that drew you to want to tell this particular story?
So it was, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to be here with you. So when it was time for me to write my first historical fiction alone, a solo book, I knew I was going to have to choose someone who I'd want to spend the next 2 years with, because that's how long. So that becomes very important. And then I knew it would have to be something that would engross me. So that's where I started. I started with looking at what decades would I want to write about. And I thought about the 1920s, which I love. And then the 1960s was another decade I'm interested in. And when I started looking in the 1920s, then I started looking for cities. And so I lived in New York. I was born and raised in New York, and that's my heart. LA, now I live in Washington, D.C., but I started in New York. And I bumped into the Harlem Renaissance. Like, I did not sit down and say, I want to write a book about the Harlem Renaissance. I wish I could say that story, but how I did it was choosing a decade and choosing a city, and I bumped into the Harlem Renaissance. And I said, I'm a writer.
Yes.
I love the Harlem Renaissance. Let me go find a woman. But I didn't know if there would really be a woman there. I'd heard about Zora and Nella, and I didn't want to write about, I wanted to find an undiscovered woman.
Right.
And then I Googled, that's not how I researched, I Googled women of the Harlem Renaissance.
Okay.
And what came up was Langston Hughes, Countee Cullen. I was like, they're not women.
Yeah, they're not women.
Google, don't be a misogynist. Where are the women of the Harlem Renaissance? But then when under Langston's name, there was a quote that Jessie Redmon Fauset was the midwife of the Harlem Renaissance. I had never heard her name. And that wasn't even enough to draw me in. It was the next thing below it that was a podcast about, it was called Harlem on My Mind. And it was 25 minutes of just Jessie Redmon Fauset. And I listened to that, and Marcy, I'm not kidding. I was like, who is she?
Who is this lady?
And that was it. Once I did that, that was it. That's how I found her. And why her? I'm a writer, and not only, even when I found her, I didn't realize how important she was to me personally.
Yes.
Was to my research, but how personally, I always say that I stand on her shoulders because she wrote the very first novel about the Black middle class, college-educated Blacks, which I've been doing for 28 years. I'm surprised I was never curious enough to ask who was the first person to write the novel There Is Confusion, which is the first ever novel written about the Black middle class by Black women. So I stand on her shoulders, but the entire Black literary canon that we have came from her.
Yes.
From everything we have came from this one single woman who discovered all of these people that we know.
And that is so powerful. Of course, you all just got a chance to see the book and her picture, Jessie Redmon Fauset. She is the woman that we are going to be talking about in this beautifully written book. So, of course, as you said, it's oftentimes hard to find information about people. So, you saw a little blurb here, a little blurb there. So that meant that in order for you to really learn her story, you were going to have to do some research. And I know you had to do some really extensive research.
Yes. So but that's the part I think I love about historical fiction and why it's my jam. One of the reasons why it's my jam. I enjoy the research. So one of the first things I did was immerse myself in Harlem. I spent weeks in Harlem. The first time I was there, I was with another writer who was also writing a book on Harlem, Tiffany Warren. And so we were writing the same time period, writing a book together. Then I went back again and again. And every time I went, I spent every day at the Schomburg Library, like it was my job. And the Schomburg, which in the book was called the 135th Street Library, is the library of the Harlem Renaissance.
Yes, I love that.
So everything is there. Like right outside the ladies' room is a picture of Jessie Redmon Fauset with Langston Hughes. And I mean, everything is there. So I spent the time there reading W.E.B's biography. Jessie did not have a biography, but she did have someone had done a thesis, which is counted as the premier information that we have on her. So I read that the whole time I was there. I read all the scholarly articles about them and everyone, because in the book you meet all of these young people, like Langston Hughes at 17. We know them as legends.
Right.
I got to meet them and write about them before anyone knew their name. I got to meet them before they wrote their first poems. I met them with Jessie before they wrote a poem. So I did all of that research there, reading the articles about them, reading the biographies, and most importantly, reading letters.
Reading letters. Yes, because there's so much that can be contained within letters, because something that someone else writes can always, be from that person's perspective. But if you know that it's that actual person that wrote that actual letter, like, this is it. This is with them in their own words. So I just found that fascinating as, I was reading through the book, because of course it is a fictionalized account.
Yes.
But there's so much rich history within it from the research that you were able to do and find out all of these things about Jessie and W.E.B. Du Bois and everybody else that was a part of their sphere.
Yes, and their world at that time. Yes. Because one of the things I don't think, Marcia, I had ever considered, there's a couple of things I hadn't considered. I knew, and we know as facts, but now you had to consider them writing. I had not considered that this was on the Harlem Renaissance happened only 50 years after emancipation.
Yes.
And I had probably heard that as a child, but 50 years might as well have been 100 and might as well have been 500 years.
Right.
At this age, I understand. 50
Right.
years.
You and me both.
I understand.
That wasn't that much time. That's not that much time.
Not much time has passed. You know, it's very different than when you're 14 and you hear 50 years and you're thinking it might as well be 500 years. That's how long it sounds. And so I really came to understand that it was 50 years after emancipation.
Right.
The other thing I didn't know or think about was the Harlem Renaissance, especially on the literary side, was really fueled by that talented tenth.
Yes. Yes.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Before I was writing this book. When it opens up, W.E.B. is the most educated Black man in the country.
Yes.
He has a PhD from Harvard. No one is more educated than W.E.B. Du Bois.
Right.
Jessie Redmon Fauset is the first Black woman to be Phi Beta Kappa. We didn't find that out later on until she wasn't, but the whole world thought she was at that point. Graduating, first Black woman to graduate from Cornell. First Black woman to be Phi Beta Kappa, had studied across the pond, had studied in France for a year, and then has a master's in languages from University of Pennsylvania. Langston Hughes was at Columbia University. Countee Cullen went to New York University before he went to Harvard University. And Zora Neale Hurston, who we meet near the end of the book, in a scene that I had to take out because nobody wanted to read a 700-page book. But in that scene, well, and even in the scene that she's in, she talks about how she was at Howard and everything. Right. And she wanted to go to Barnard. And she Zora Neale Hurston ended up that night at that party getting a scholarship to go to Barnard College, which is the college for Columbia. And she became the first Black woman accepted into Barnard. So we were talking about, I didn't realize how, and I'm using elitist in the most positive way.
Right.
Here, but it was very elitist. And I didn't realize that before coming into this world. But they were the talented 10th, almost proving W.E.B.'s point. Almost proving it. So those were two things I had never considered that I loved about being in this world. That it was only 50 years since they had taken the chains off.
Right.
And all of these people that we know as legends, because, we know a 30, 40-year-old, very confident Langston Hughes. Who's right. I met Langston Hughes when he was so afraid to meet Jessie Redmon Fauset and W.E.B. Du Bois that he took his mother with him to his dinner. And that's a real thing. That story, that really happened. And he was so scared. He talks about it in his biography that his hands were sweating, but he took his mother because he figured she'd do all the talking and he didn't want to stay to them.
Right. Yeah, that's what I really loved about the book, because learning about Jessie, learning about W.E.B. and their relationship, we'll get into that here in a little bit. But just all of the other characters, because, I don't know if you can see how I have all my little tabs and stuff. I was tabbing all kinds of stuff because it's almost like a who's who. It's like a who's who of the Harlem Renaissance, and and some of the early leaders in the NAACP and all of these things. But you're right about the timeline, because just thinking about how things are just starting, because, you are Delta Sigma Theta, I am actually Sigma Gamma Rho. Our sororities were formulated in that same little
that time period. Yes.
So it's
all of that's in there as well.
Yes.
Because when it was time for her to take a trip with the NAACP, they didn't have the money for her. And she went to Delta Sigma Theta. She wasn't a member yet. And they said, yes, we want to do anything to promote women's issues.
Right.
And she got over to Brussels, and that's when she became an international star.
Right. Because before that, she was known for her work that she was doing with the NAACP and the crisis. That's the whole writer piece that comes in. Yes. So just to give us a little, how did she end up working for the crisis? Because there was a relationship that she had with W.E.B. even prior to going to work for the crisis.
Yeah.
Just give us a little bit of
that. So when she graduated from Cornell University, she really wanted to get into publishing, but there were no women and certainly no Black women. So she ended up doing what most women had to do when they graduated from college, which was become a teacher. And she ended up teaching languages and finally ended up at a high school here in Washington, D.C. called Dunbar, which was the very first public academic high school for Black people in the country. So it was very prestigious, and some of the top people went there, taught there, graduated from there. So she taught there for many years. But in 1903, the year her father died, was the same time that she reached out to W.E.B. Du Bois after reading his book, The Souls of Black Folk. And she reached out to him, and he became, from 1903 to 1914, he became a mentor to her. He was, she reached out to him saying how much she loved the book. He helped her to get her first internship at this university. He encouraged her to go get her master's. They had never met. It was all through writing, because this is 1903, 1904. Right. It's not that easy to get around. So it was all through letters and everything. And then they finally met in about 1914, and they went from being mentor-mentee, he was 14 years older than her, to being lovers.
Yes.
And so it's really interesting, because when I wrote this book, I was just writing the facts. Just writing the facts. I was not thinking about, am I writing a salacious book or anything, because I didn't discover the affair. I wasn't having the affair.
Right.
But the thing that's so interesting to me is the affair has garnered way more attention than I thought. Way more attention. Because once they started having the affair, she ended up coming to New York to be the literary editor of the Crisis magazine, which was the preeminent magazine in the country and the official publication for the NAACP. Right. And so before she came to New York to be the literary editor, there was no literary editor. It wasn't as if he was replacing her. He created the position. But the reason we know that he created that position just for her was when she left, there was never a literary editor again.
Never one again.
Never again.
And of course, he had ulterior motives in bringing her in there. Not that she wasn't brilliant and all of these things, but up until this point, once they became lovers, it was kind of like a long distance situation.
Long distance. And it was for a long time. So they had been lovers for about 5 years before he brought her up there. And I believe he brought her up there so that she would be close to him. I know that he knew how much she loved writing and what she wanted to do. So I think I honestly believe he brought her there to be close to her, because he didn't really have any expectations her as a woman, or doing any of this. And then so he brought her to New York to be close to him. And she turned that into a movement.
She did. And that's what I love about that. And, I had an opportunity to meet you in person and when you were here in Atlanta. And, one of the things you were talking about, as you said, a lot of people are like really honing in on, the affair, and all these thoughts about that. But for me, all of the things she was able to do, she wouldn't have been able to do them without that relationship.
Without the relationship.
So, I mean, it is what it is.
And it's so interesting about that, because not only so when I found out about the affair, because it wasn't right at the beginning, but it was near the beginning, I wondered if I could write the book without the affair.
Right.
And then I said, and I'm writing a biographical novel. So then I said, could I write it without the affair? And the first chapter, I bump into a plot hole if I do that.
Right.
Because how'd you get to New York? So I would have had to make up a lie about why she was in New York.
Right.
And so, because and the reason I say make up a lie is no one respected women then. I mean, one of the things that women didn't respect women. Half of the women didn't even want the right to vote. So to say that WEB just decided to hire a woman editor, I would have had to make up a whole lie. It would have been a lie. The next thing was the title of her book, There Is Confusion, was based on their relationship. I have a letter where she wrote to him saying, I'm going to call my book There Is Confusion. It came from a poem that she knew. She said, because if I could tell people everything about us, they would know about you and your problems. And so it wasn't a happy letter. So, so with a title like There Is Confusion, without putting the affair in the book, I would have had to make up a lie as to why she would name her book that. Right. And in the book, one of her most important poems that one she's most known for has a very interesting last line. And I don't think it's going to take away. It's no spoiler, but the last line says, I wish that I were dead. And so I would have had to put the poem in the book, but lie about why that was the last line. Right. So I said, if I'm going to do all of that lying, then I'm not writing her story. Right. And so, and I'm not a technical writer. By this, I mean, people often say to me, how many chapters do you have in a book? I don't know. How many pages are your chapters? I don't know. I just write the story as it's coming out of me. But this time, I really did count the number of scenes of the affair. Okay. The number of scenes where she was working. Because I needed enough scenes so that of their affair. So that by the time she names her book, There Is Confusion, everybody understands why she names her book that. Yeah, why there's confusion. Because when she names her book, There's Confusion, everybody said, yeah, girl, that's the best title, because y'all two are a hot mess. Right, right. If I had pulled back the affair, people would have been like, well, why? And I also think if I had left out the affair, people would have known. I mean, people would have said, I think they were having an affair, Victoria. Why didn't you put that part in? Right. So that has been interesting to me. I never wanted the affair to take over. And so that's why it's not a salacious book. It's not. It's not. I mean, they're either in bed waking up or they're going to bed. And I know how to write those scenes. I wrote a book called Lust that ended up on Lifetime TV. Yes, you did. So I know how to write that stuff. I made a conscious decision not to have it physical like that, because I didn't want it to overpower the story and take away from either one of their accomplishments. They were both ordinary people who had accomplished extraordinary things. Absolutely. They were just people who were peopling. And I couldn't help but think about Dr. Martin Luther King. When you talk about the 60s, I mean, we have found out over time a lot of things about him and things that happened in his personal life outside of the work that he was doing. And I guess that's just a thing, because people are quick to snap to a judgment and all of these sorts of things when they hear something like an affair or whatever the case may be. And sometimes that stuff may overshadow the fact that, hey, yes, there is this one area of their life that maybe you don't agree with, but there's so many other wonderful things that they're doing in the world. And it didn't take away from all of the wonderful things they were doing in the world. While they were having an affair, she found a 17-year-old Langston Hughes and said, learn how to write from your heart. When you go to Mexico with your father, use that experience to write. And he came back with his first poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, which was just amazing. While they were having an affair, he was traveling the world. This is something I learned about W.E.B. Du Bois, where he wasn't just fighting for equality for Black people in this country, and he really was, almost by himself with the anti-lynching bills and everything. But he was around the world fighting in every country in Africa, fighting against the colonizers who were raping the resources out of the countries. And, you know, I always think about him, as I really learned about him in this book, how Martin Luther King actually had an entourage. He had Andrew Young and Ralph Abernathy, and you could probably name even more than I had, Jesse Jackson. He had people working with him. Right. W.E.B. Du Bois had no one. Yes. He was going around the world. He
Right.
could have, and if there was a position and an election, he would have been voted the president of colored people of the world,
Mm-hmm.
because he was fighting for everyone. He was doing all of that, and yes, he was having an affair.
Yes. Yes. So, I mean, you have to consider that. One thing that was really interesting about his take, though, because, we have Jessie, who is the literary editor, right? So it's a lot of books and, art, because there's parts in there where we're talking about theater and other things as well. I found he had an interesting take that art was supposed to be propaganda.
Yes. And I now I changed the word propaganda, and I say, because he really affected me as I was writing this book, learning more about him, reading the souls of Black folks as a 60-year-old, 69-year-old woman versus when I read it when I was 14 years old. I mean, I really got into it now and understood it. When I was 14, I read it as a freshman in college. A freshman in high school. All I could have told you about the souls of Black folk at that point was, I think there's something in here about the talented tenth. I mean, I didn't know, but I thought I knew what I was talking about. And he was just a person who was making such a difference in life when he was talking about art as propaganda, or I used to say art as activism. He was talking about all art should almost be our protest. It should be our resistance. It should be our way of uplifting our race. And he spoke to me so much, because that art as activism, which is, I think, what he meant. Art
it definitely makes a difference. The word.
Because propaganda, that's what it meant then. That's what it meant then. And then as we got to school, propaganda kind of became a word of it's misinformation or something like
fake news.
Yeah, fake news. That's it. That's what. But he meant art should be used to change people's minds.
Yes.
Art should be used to build up our race. And I really took that to heart, because, like you said, I've written across every genre. I was never a genre writer. I just wrote what was in my heart. I'm a historical fiction writer now, because this is what I think about Harlem Rhapsody. If I hadn't told Jessie's story 100 years later, and another 100 years past, her history would have been totally erased. So I always say, a history untold is a history that will be erased.
That's true.
And so what I feel now in this day, when people are trying to ban us and burn us and, brush us aside and bury our history, it's my job now, as my art, as my activism, to excavate us.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go and find every single story. And as they ban one book, I will write two.
Come on now.
Because that's what I was so influenced. And I wish you would know that I was so influenced by my research of him. So, like, when people are upset with him about the affair and looking at him side-eye, this man changed my life during my research. This man helped me to see that all of us should be using our gifts to uplift us. Yes, I'm an entertainer, but what I'm going to be doing now is excavating our history.
Yes.
So that while they're burying it, I'm the one digging it up. And I'm just going to have to find a way to write faster, especially in this day.
Absolutely. Because right now there's just so much. And you answered the question I was going to ask, because right now there is so much. We know that the history is being buried. They're trying to change things with the right there in your city, the Blacksonian, we call it.
Oh my God.
All these things that are happening to try to erase. So the fact that you and others who are working in the same genre, who are uncovering these stories, it's just so very important that you continue to do that.
And I will continue to do that. And while writing is my activism, my art is my activism, reading is your activism.
Yes.
Because the more we are aware, the more we come to know, the more we come to understand, it gives us a greater chance to share.
Absolutely.
And that's how our history is going to remain. They can't burn every book I write.
No, they cannot. They cannot. And it's in you saying that, many may not know, Brown Girl Collective will be 16 in July. But when I first started it in the earlier days, I was doing a lot of sharing historical snippets of Black women. So I knew about Jessie Redmon Fauset. I just didn't know the depth of what you went into in your book. But yeah, there are a lot of the women that you mentioned.
I need to talk to you.
Yes, I can. Yeah, we can talk. We can come up with some people, because I actually, you can't see them. I have like 3 thick volumes about this big. There's 3 of them sitting back here that are all about Black women in history. So yeah, we can have.
Oh my goodness, you are my resource, because I am determined, and I want to find these women like Jessie Redmon Fauset, who very few people knew her name. I didn't know her name, but she made such a major accomplishment. How was she hidden? How every single book that somebody's going to read this year started with Jessie, because the night that her was her launch party for There Is Confusion. She had gotten, because you read the book, she received all this critical acclaim and everything for it, and it was the launch party for her book. Now there was some misogynistic things going on there tonight, but it was still for her. And that's when they declared that night the beginning of the new Negro movement. And what we call today the Harlem Renaissance. Now, the thing that's so interesting about that is you can't have a movement. It wouldn't have been a movement if it had ended with There Is Confusion.
Right.
But over the next 3 or 4 years, 40 books were published by white publishers who were there at that party that night. So they were exposed. But of those 40 books, they were books written by all of Jessie's students, all of her, mentees. Langston Hughes' book came out. Jean Toomer's book came out. Countee Cullen's book came out. Anna Bontem's book came out. Nella wrote 2 of her books right then. And so you can't have a movement if you don't have anyone to follow you.
Right.
Jessie had raised them up. When she wrote her book, they were already, they were still in their early 20s. But they were already winning prizes and doing their thing. And when her book came out and the white publishing people saw, wow, a Black book will sell. Yes. Everybody wanted their own Black author. And books just kept coming out right after that. And that became the Harlem Renaissance that would have never happened with Jessie Redmon Fauset without her. So absolutely. I say every book that we've written since then has been built on that. And so every book I will write, or every book you will read, the foundation is Jessie Redmon Fauset.
Absolutely. We have a wonderful a wonderful comment, I can't talk, from your soror and my friend, Wanda Lloyd.
Yes, I'm going to see her.
Yes. I knew her from my days in Savannah before I moved to Atlanta. Thank you so much for that comment, Wanda. Love you so much.
Yes.
And then also, this is so interesting. It is interesting. And of course, anybody who watches, we're not going to give you all the spoilers. We just want to whet your appetite.
I just want to whet.
Yeah.
Like there is like when you say the words Harlem Renaissance, you should see her face. There should be nobody else's face, because Harlem Renaissance started when Langston was 17 and Countee was 16 and Nella was in her early 20s and her own self-esteem issues, and Jean too. And another thing that I found fascinating about her was how she walked each one of them through their own issues. Like Nella Larsen's issue was she really didn't feel up to the Harlem elite because she didn't graduate from Fisk University. Langston Hughes was going through all of that discrimination at Columbia University. And Columbia recently, like within the last 2 years, they apologized to Langston Hughes because of how he had been treated at Columbia. And then one of the most interesting ones was Jean Toomer.
Oh, yes.
Who had been was a wonderful Harlem Renaissance writer, but he didn't want to be known as a Black writer. He didn't want to be known as a white writer either. He
He's
wanted
like,
to
I'm
be
just a
known as
person. I'm just
American.
human.
He said, he said, I didn't write my book with these 5 black fingers or the left side of my white brain. I just want to be known as American. And I loved how she had to help each of them with their own different issues while writing in every issue of the Crisis magazine herself, while being the most prolific writer of the Harlem Renaissance. She wrote 4 novels during the whole period of time. While doing all of that, helping the NAACP magazine just soar in subscriptions, I don't know, I always said, I wonder how she got 35 hours in her day, because there's only 24 of mine.
Yeah, she was definitely doing a lot, and it started from the minute she landed at the Crisis, because she went there, to be the literary editor, but then she's trying to help straighten out all the mess in the office and going through all the correspondence and all these things, trying to set things up so they could really tap into the work that they needed to do. And we haven't really talked about it yet. The Brownies
book.
Yes.
Yeah, the Brownies book is probably the most interesting thing. I didn't know about it. It is the only magazine we've had. We had Ebony Jr. for a few minutes.
Yes.
But 50 years after emancipation, W.E.B. Du Bois said, we must have positive images for our children out there, because they only know us as slaves and servants.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had this vision in his head of the Brownie book, which would be a magazine for Black children. And she took the vision from his head and made it a magazine that everybody was talking about. And she did the whole thing, giving Black children not only an opportunity to see Black doctors, lawyers, teachers, everything, but she also gave them a voice. It was the only time where Black children could write into anywhere and somebody would read their letters and answer them. Whether they were letters that were positive or letters where they didn't feel good about themselves, she answered all of those letters too. And the Brownies book was I can't believe that it only lasted 2 years, because Black people didn't support it. I had a part in there. You should see the letter he wrote to Black people. He was pissed. He was pissed when that was his heart, and it went out of business because he knew that the talented 10th weren't just born. He knew the talented 10th would be raised. And he knew that they had to see themselves in a positive way. And he was pissed that Black people did not support that magazine for $1.50 a year. And then, so I'm surprised that it didn't last longer than than 2 years. But I'm also surprised that 100 years later, we still don't have that.
Yeah. And well, magazines in their true form aren't really what they used to be at all. Because even the few that are still out there, it's like they get thinner and thinner every time one comes out.
Exactly.
So I don't know. It is something that's definitely needed, because there's so much on the internet which can get convoluted, because you have to find it, number one. And there's so much other stuff that you have to guard children against while they may be on the internet seeking information. But you're right. We're doing a lot better with children's books that center Black children, but something like that where you can pick up and flip through and read.
Flip it through, and for the kids too, flip it through, and maybe kids, because kids were able to write in and put stories in. And that is really where Langston Hughes, Nella Larsen were all first published. And people don't know that. People think that that Langston Hughes' poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, is his first poem. It was his first big poem. And it was the first time he was published in a Crisis magazine. But he had written 3 or 4 poems, and probably more than that, in the Brownies book.
Now, of course, we're talking about everything that's happening in Harlem, the Harlem Renaissance period, launching. We've talked about WEB and Jessie having the relationship. I was about to say a different name, but yes, Jessie having the relationship and all of that. But remember, this is historical fiction. So we're seeing what's happening with them in Harlem, but they're also in the book. You also talk about what happened in Tulsa. You also mentioned, what happened in Rosewood and things like that, because no matter what's happening, even with us in the here and now, we have our own individual lives, but there's so many other things that are going on around us.
Yeah, the world affected them. This is one of the things that was so interesting to me, and I only found it through research and going through it, is that Langston Hughes' first poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, the poem that talks about Negroes being there from the beginning. We were at the Nile, we were at the pyramids in Egypt, we were in Mississippi, slinging cotton. We were everywhere. That poem was published in the June 1921 issue of The Crisis. And so the Tulsa riots happened on June 2nd. And the day that these magazines were being delivered to 100,000 subscribers, they were burning down Tulsa. And I was wondering, this is where fiction comes in, that it's not fiction, because I bet this happened. We know that was the day that the poems came out, his poem came out, and we know that was the day of the riots. And so I was wondering, what was Jessie feeling? When that poem came out, and how did she realize how important that poem was on that day? And that's when the fiction comes, but it's based on history.
Right.
It's based on history, because she was at the NAACP offices. They had to have been talking about the riots. Walter White had to be, who was, he wasn't the executive secretary then. He was one step under. But James Weldon Johnson was there. They had to be there. So they were all in the office. I don't know what they said. I don't know. And that's where the fiction comes in. But sometimes we talk about, as historical writers, that it's so interesting that sometimes we will write something and then we find out that it really did happen that way. Because we are basing it in history. And I always tell people, that's how you should look at historical fiction, because historical fiction, the dichotomy of those two words is weird, because historical fiction, the truth and a lie.
Right.
And I always say what it is that it's the information of history mixed with the imagination of my mind.
Yes.
But the information of history comes first. Then it's mixed with the imagination. And that's the story.
Oh, what a brilliant mind you have, Miss Victoria. Yes. Yes, because that is oftentimes a question that'll come up, because with the exception of things that you can find in letters, which you talked about, those letters that you could find, you don't really have like actual dates necessarily. You don't have actual dialogue, like where two people getting into an argument or whatever, something like that. So there definitely does have to come some level of, your imagination. But to get to that space, that's where the research comes in, where you can like really learn about that person and feel that you can speak using their voice, so to speak.
Yes, and it's all anchored in history. Every chapter is anchored in history. And the more outrageous it is, it happened, because I know there's a scene in there that the anniversary party.
Yes.
Even my editor said, we're gonna make sure that you put in the historical notes that thing really happened. Okay.
Yes.
Because I did not make that up. My imagination's not that good.
Yes. Y'all have to read it to know exactly what she's talking about. We have a comment from someone who has read the book, Takara, saying, I love the book, just finished it last night. As a fellow writer, I am so inspired. This story will live with me.
I'm so happy. And I love that it's Jessie that inspired her. You know what's so interesting? I have written, excuse me, over 30 books. And when people compliment me with my other books, I take it personally. I'm so excited. But when people compliment me on Harlem Rhapsody, like that young lady, it was Jessie who inspired her. It was Jessie who did. And I just feel like this woman who accomplished so much is just getting her flowers.
Yes.
I just ask everybody to tell people they know about this book, because she is one of the most important Black women in our history.
Mm-hmm. She definitely is. And she also went against convention. Because I mean, we talked about her career and all the things that she's doing, but think early 20s.
100 years ago.
Yeah, 100 years ago, it was like, okay, maybe you were able to get an education, but as you said, it was kind of the elite who were getting
it. Was the elite. Only there was a 2% high school graduation rate among Black people, men. And there were women, it was really interesting, women going to college, because the women didn't have careers, you know. And when Jessie moved to New York, women didn't have careers. She couldn't vote. She couldn't get an apartment in her own name, which is why women didn't live alone, because if you were a woman who lived alone, it was assumed that a man was paying for you. Mm-hmm. And so you would become a woman of, okay, who's this man paying for you? Right. Women couldn't have the bank accounts and everything. Everything had to be done through a man. And so I think about what she went and did, what she accomplished in the face of racism that we still experience, but we don't experience the sexism at the level that she did. Because women are expected in the workplace now, even though sometimes they try to hold you down. They weren't even expected to walk in the door in 1919.
Mm-hmm. Not expected to walk in the door at all. So we have another comment. I love the book. I listened while I worked on your quilt. Oh, I love that.
I love that too.
Oh, love it. Yes. And I did reading and listening. So I read half and I listened to the other half. But as I was listening, I was still going in and adding tabs. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's chapter so. Let me add my little tab.
I know.
But yes, it's such a great story, because as you say, it introduces Jessie to us. It introduces all these things about the Harlem Renaissance to us, or that whole time period. It is inspirational to think about that there were people who had these gifts and talents, and at an early age, or maybe not an early age, but that they had someone who was able to nurture them into, becoming who they wanted to become.
Yeah, because I often say, would the Harlem Renaissance have happened without their affair?
Yes.
Because they were nurtured, like you said. Like, nobody thinks about Langston Hughes and Countee Cullen and Jean Toomer as young, unpublished people. Mm-hmm. We know them as literary legends. They were unpublished when Jessie met them. They didn't even know how to go about doing this and really getting it done. And so she was the woman who took these young people, and it's almost like, I don't want to be a misogynist myself, but it's almost like a woman had to be the one there nurturing them, because I don't know if W.E.B. would have done it on his own.
Man, he was too busy doing other stuff anyway.
That's true. Would another man have known? She mothered them, not in a negative way, but they came to her with all of their concerns. Mm-hmm. And she helped them. She didn't baby them. She helped them work through their issues. And they were adults. They were young men, and she treated them that way.
Yes. We have some more comments. This is actually a good friend of mine. Hey, Morgan. She said, thank you, Sora Murray, for this book. Thoroughly enjoyed getting to know Jessie Fauset and her vital contributions to our culture. Yes.
Oh, thank you so much.
We worked together in our day jobs. So we were talking. She called me yesterday and was saying, yeah, this book was so good. So
good. Well, I'm glad the people who read it here understood that the affair was just.
It was inconsequential to the work that she did.
Yeah,
yes. And Wanda, again, she's listening while I walk my Bella every day. Okay. And one more coming from Cleta. I guess you're going to be somewhere tomorrow. She
Yeah.
said she
Oh,
can't wait
yes.
to
I'm going to
see
be in
you.
Delaware
Okay.
tomorrow. I'm going to be in Delaware. I'm so excited.
Okay. So Cleta, make sure you told her you were here. So
Yeah, definitely. I'll recognize her name, Cleta.
Yes.
I'll recognize her name.
Yes. So this book is just so fabulous. I'm glad that you found Jessie, or Jessie found you.
Jessie found me. I'm so grateful. I'm so, let me tell you how grateful I am, because I was really into the book when I found out that she was a member of Delta Sigma Theta.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to give the money back.
Oh,
because
wow.
I wasn't going to write a book about a Delta having an affair with W.E.B. Du Bois. And I mean, it shut me down for a little while.
Wow.
And because I was like, oh my God, Deltas are perfect. My sorors are going to kill me. They're going to kill me for exposing that we're not perfect. I mean, I was really so concerned about my sorors, who have been the best with this. They're like, girl, B, please. But I was so concerned that it shut me down from writing for a little while and writing this story. And then I said, you know what? If the first president of Delta Sigma Theta accepted her, certainly I can too.
Right.
But what is so good was that at that point, I knew all of that. If I had found out at the beginning before I knew anything, I would have never written Jessie's story.
Wow.
Never.
Wow.
I would have found something else to write about. And that's so sad, because her story needed to be told.
It needed to be told. And your soror, my friend Morgan, is saying, thank you for not shying away from their intimate relationship, as it was such an important part of the story. Jessie and W.E.B. gave birth together to so much.
So much. That's so true, because they birthed the Brownie book. They took the Crisis to new heights. I mean, they did so much together. So thank you for saying that, Sora.
Yes. And Cleta, who's going to see you tomorrow, said the excitement of this combo is just jumping off the screen. Well, I'm so glad that you're saying that. Glad that you're saying it.
I know. I can talk about Jessie all night long, because she, we often have that term, we stand on someone's shoulders. Like, I literally stand on her shoulders. For 28 years, I've been writing about college-educated Black people, and she was the first one to do it. Yes.
That is fabulous. You are fabulous, because like I said at the beginning, for those who didn't see the very beginning, I've been trying to get Miss Victoria Christopher Murray for a minute, but now the stars and everything align. This is the perfect book, the perfect time, the perfect situation for us to really be able to have this conversation, to talk about Jessie as someone really, and W.E.B. as well, just looking at what they did, now that we are really in this time where, unfortunately, the more we move ahead, the more we go back, you know what I mean? So just reading about all these great people and the work that they did, and their heart for the community, for their art, for that activism, as you say, to inspire us to figure out what we need to do. Just like you said, if you ban one, you're going to write two, Hey,
that's the thing. Ban one, write two. But here's my thing too, because we've always used art as activism through the 60s, the civil rights movement, everything. So we just can do it now. And I just don't want people to think they don't have anything, because reading these books is activism too.
And not being afraid to have the conversations.
Yes.
This is a public sphere, y'all.
We have to have the conversation.
Another thing that really I loved them talking about, having their literary salons, because I love the idea of a literary salon. It's something I've thought about doing and may still do. Just having a chance to come together and talk about books and literature and all of that.
And I didn't even put that many in the book, because it would have been over and over again, but they had literary salons, and in Jessie's, at her house, where everybody came, and it was all about literature, what they were working on. They would read to each other and everything. And it was interesting, because Langston Hughes in his book said, Jessie's was a little light on the spirits, you know. And there's a story about one time they took the punch bowl and poured some other stuff into it to kind of, but she used to make people speak French when they came to her. And so I just only did one, but they all had them. I mean, they would all have them at their houses. James Weldon Johnson, everybody just had it. And I mean, that was such a special time. Those special,
yes.
I mean, James Weldon Johnson, like, she walks in the room and he's there and she's trying not to fangirl because that's
right.
And but he was part of the NAACP, and a lot of people told me that from the first and second chapter they learned so much, because a lot of people didn't know that the NAACP was started by mostly white people.
Yes, it was.
And they were sitting, and all those white people were sitting there. In fact, the lady who did not like Jessie, and
yes, didn't like her.
Yeah, but you know what? To me, if there was a mother of the NAACP, it was her. It was in her. It almost started in her kitchen. She was sick of the lynchings. She wanted it to stop. She called over a friend. What can we do? And they started something called the Niagara Movement first, that grew into the NAACP. I think because she shows up in some other places and some of my other books. And I think with Jessie was she saw this beautiful young girl. Because the picture you have, she's a little bit middle-aged. Her younger picture, I'm going to text it to you. You should see her picture. She saw this beautiful young girl.
Yeah.
And she was like, she already knew who he was. And she was friends with his wife.
Right.
And I think that's where it was. Yeah. I mean, I don't have anything to prove that, except that I know who she was starting the NAACP. And in some of my other next book that's coming out, she was really this wonderful woman who helped a Black woman go to Smith College. So
she just didn't like her for the obvious reasons. Yeah, she just didn't like her.
She didn't like her at all. I mean,
yes,
all the stuff I put in there was true.
And it makes sense. And we've only touched on some of the people and things that we learned in this book, because just even Jessie's mother.
Isn't her mother amazing? Can I tell a quick story about?
Please, you told me I'm last, so hey,
okay,
you talk as long as you want.
So her mother was so interesting, because here's another place where I got stuck, and this was almost near the beginning, because I tried to find the key people, and I knew her mother was a stepmother, but the only mother she knew, and I knew she was a white Jewish woman. And so then I knew she was a widow with 3 children, marrying a Black man, a widower with 7 children. And I was like, okay, I don't understand. How is this white woman marrying this Black dude? They already got a baseball team between.
Right.
But this was the late 1800s. And I was trying to figure out, why would she marry a Black man? And even my agent was trying to help me. And she was like, well, maybe Jewish, and they were treating Jewish and Black people the same. And it just didn't sit right with me. And after about 3 weeks of trying to find information about her, and there wasn't much to find out about Isabella Huff, after about 3 weeks of that, something told me to go to the census. And I think I went to the census to look for her mother and father.
Okay.
I just wanted to know more about her. And what I found in the census was that her first husband was Black. She just married. That's just what she did. She just married men. That's just what she liked. But she was an integrationist, a term I had not heard before. I'd heard of abolitionists who fought for the freedom of slaves, but then they became integrationists, just trying to integrate. They believed the only way to equality was with the complete integration of the races. So Isabella Huff Fauset, her stepmother, was going to integrate America all by herself, because she had 3 mixed children with her first Black husband.
Yes, right.
She had 3 mixed children with her next one. If she had married again, but I loved her because this was the woman who raised Jessie.
Yes.
And so I know Jessie ended up at the Philadelphia High School for Girls as the first Black woman to go there because of Isabella. Right. I know that she pushed her to Cornell, and she really just pushed her. And but she had such a unique perspective of the world as a white woman who wanted complete integration. And there were moments when she had to remind Jessie who she was.
Right. Right.
I just loved her. I loved her. Like, somebody should write her book. I'm not going to write it, but somebody should write her book.
Yes, but I just wanted to bring that up just so to give you all, everyone who hasn't read it yet, several people in here have, which I love that. But for those who haven't yet, just know that it is a wealth of information, a wealth of history, some powerful women who are doing things in multiple ways. It's not just one, because we see Sadie Tanner Moselle in here. Georgia Douglas Johnson was her part of the story.
Yeah. She was probably the most famous Black poet at the time.
So we see a lot of familiar and some unfamiliar faces in this book. So Victoria, I know we could talk all night because
this is thank you so much. Thank you for loving Jessie as much as I do.
Yes. Thank you for being here. We have one last comment. Yes, love the book, listening on Audible. So,
I love it too. I love that, because the Audible is excellent because it's Robin Miles who's the narrator.
Robin Miles, and
Robin's one of the best in the business. Like, you have to ask if she'll do it and then pray that she says yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She doesn't say yes right away because she's the highest one in demand. And so I'm so blessed that she wanted to do Harlem Rhapsody.
I love that. So I know that you said you're going to be in Delaware tomorrow. Are there any other events? Now, this is for those of you who are watching live. Of course, if you watch it later, it may be too late. But within the next few days or next couple of weeks, any place that you'll be that people can find you in person?
Yeah. So I should have looked at my calendar, but I'll be in Delaware tomorrow, in Wilmington at the Wilmington Library. Next week, I will be in Indianapolis at the Christamore. And I think they're expecting 1,400 people there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then I have a Black bookstore tour.
Yes.
Because the reason I wanted to do this was when I first started almost 30 years ago, it was the Black bookstores that put me on the map. I would not have a career without the Black bookstores because they would go in and hand sell my books. And then in 2007, there was kind of a publishing crash when Borders went out of business and Kindles came around and everything. And so many of the Black bookstores went out of business. And I, over the years, just didn't know. As I was on tour for the Harlem Rhapsody, the owner, Ramunda Young of Mahogany Books, told me that there were about 150 Black bookstores now. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. And so I said, okay, I need to do something about this. And so I can't go to 150 stores, not right now. But in May, Rashonda Tate and I will be doing a Black book tour through the South. We're going to 8 stores. And the thing that's great about having so many is I don't plan to stop this. Like, if I don't have nothing to do next February, I'll say, okay, I'm going to do another Black bookstore tour and I'll do the West Coast or whatever. So this is not going to stop. This is just the first. And I'll be going around to the Black bookstore. So that begins May 12th through like the 23rd. But people can always go to my website and find out all my tour dates.
Yes, and all of that information has been scrolling the entire time. So if you didn't get it, shame on you.
That's right. All I have to do is Google Victoria Christopher Murray and
and it'll pop up.
That's what I use.
Yes, and I love that you are going on tour with one of your BFFs. I actually interviewed her for Queen of Sugar last year, right after it came out. So I feel good now because I've had both of you.
Oh, thank you. Well, we're excited.
Yes, so thank you so much again for your time, for being here. Thank you for everyone for your time and attention.
If I could ask everybody who's listening if they could do 2 favors, because one is something I know, but somebody gave me, and the other one I just learned this year. But if Elin Harris told me, it was a good friend of mine, Elin Harris told me that the only way Black authors build their market is by word of mouth.
Yes.
And so if people enjoyed the book, if they could just tell 5 people, Just tell 5 people about this. I would greatly appreciate it. Become kind of an ambassador for Jessie Redmon Fauset. I think she deserves that. And then the second thing, this is something I did not learn till this year. Did you know how important reviews were?
I have heard that they are very important.
No, I had no clue. Reviews actually help bookstores reorder. It changes the algorithm. So whether or not a person's doing a review on Goodreads or Amazon, it doesn't matter. Either one, because I guess they populate each other. And it doesn't have to be anything long. It could be, I like the book, period.
Right.
That's it. So if people could just tell 5 people and do a review, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Yes, please do that. And 5 stars, because it deserves 5 stars.
Oh, well, I don't tell people.
That's me. That's me. I take responsibility. I said it. I said that. I'm talking about me. So I'm encouraging. You don't have to, but I'm just saying it deserves 5 stars.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I put everything I had into this book.
Yes, and it definitely shows. So Victoria, again, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you, and I look forward to the next one, whatever that next one is. Yeah. Now that you've been here, we got to
that's right. And thank you for not giving up on me, and we're getting together.
I wasn't gonna give up. Yes. So I have the book because of Bookstagram. Yes.
Yeah.
There's so many places that people are sharing out and sharing their experiences and meeting you and all of those wonderful things. So yes, let us all continue to do that. Continue to support Victoria Christopher Murray and all that she's doing. And Jessie Redmon Fauset. Spread the word, spread the word, spread the word. So I'm going to let you grab some water, but please don't hang up yet because I just want to holler at you right quick.
Okay.
And I also want to tell everybody who's coming next week, which is somebody I'm sure you're going to be happy to hear about as well. So I will see you in just a second, and thanks again. All right, everybody. I'm so happy that I finally had a chance to have this conversation with Victoria because I've been wanting to talk to her for a while because I know that she is a dynamic writer, a superstar in the world of Black literature. So I consider it an honor to have had her here for the first time of many more to come. But speaking of superstars, next week, and it will be at the regular time at 8:00 p.m., we have another superstar coming to the room who has written 150 books, and that is Brenda Jackson. She will be here next week, Wednesday at 8 p.m. to talk about, this is her 150th book, y'all. So she's been in the game for a minute, spilling the tea. So please join us next week at 8 p.m. on Wednesday if you're watching in real time. And of course, the recording will be available, but join us next week for Brenda Jackson, an icon in Black romance literature, for spilling the tea. So I look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, in between time, enjoy your reading. Pick up Victoria's book if you haven't read it yet. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Take good care.